Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. On February 27, 2013, following a lead from a vehicle's GPS, agents from the anti-kidnapping unit arrived at a ravine in Quito, Ecuador. They followed a dirt road and discovered a crucial clue, an owl necklace that belonged to the victim they were investigating. As they searched further, the smell of decay led them to a tree trunk. When they lifted it, their worst fears were confirmed. 20-year-old Karina Del was found lifeless. Karina was born in 1993 in Quito, Ecuador. Her early years were marked by tragedy, as her father passed away from cancer when she was just 2 years old. Karina, her older brother Milton, and their mother had to navigate life without him. Despite these hardships, Karina found comfort in her close friends, Liz and Ala, with whom she had been friends since she was 3. However, tragedy struck again in 2008 when Karina's mother also died from cancer. Before passing, Karina's mother entrusted Liz's mother with taking care of Karina, a promise she kept. Now orphans, Karina and Milton had to work to support themselves. At just 15, Karina started modeling due to her beauty, but she never let her education suffer. She dreamed of going to university to study business administration or marketing. Despite working as a model and producer, her income was never enough to fully fund her future. Determined to achieve her goals, she searched for better job opportunities. On February 19, 2013, Karina told her brother she was going to collect her final paycheck from the Ministry of Labor and drop off some resumes. She left home wearing her signature owl necklace. That day, she met up with a friend, Maria Cecilia, and they delivered resumes together. Later, they met up with Juan Pablo, a young man interested in Karina, at a local bar. Karina sent her brother a message saying she was out with friends and would be home later. That was the last time Milton heard from her. The next morning, Karina hadn't returned home. Milton's calls to her went unanswered, and her phone was turned off. He immediately began searching for her, visiting her old job and local universities. Liz and her family soon joined the search, putting up flyers and spreading the word about Karina's disappearance. Friends, family, and strangers united to help. Liz even reached out to a psychic, hoping for any clue. On February 21st, the state attorney's office officially filed a missing person report. Milton informed the police that Karina had last been with Cecilia. The police quickly contacted Cecilia, who recounted the events of that day. After dropping off their resumes, they went to a bar and met Juan Pablo. Later, Juan Pablo offered to take Karina home, but instead insisted they visit his apartment. They agreed, hoping to return home later. They left the bar around 7 p.m., heading to his apartment. Pablo called over 4 friends to join the group: Jose Antonio, Nicholas, Manuel, and David. Notably, David had previously dated Karina 4 years earlier, and Nicholas happened to be Cecilia's ex-boyfriend. This setup was turning into quite an unusual gathering. As the night went on, the girls expressed their desire to leave, but Juan Pablo, who was on the phone with Jose, managed to persuade them to stay a little longer. As the group continued to drink and smoke, Manuel offered to drive everyone home around 1:30 a.m. Cecilia suggested that Karina should spend the night at her place, but Karina firmly insisted that she needed to go home. When they finally left the apartment, Karina and David were seated in the back of the car, while Jose and Manuel occupied the front. They first dropped off Cecilia and Nicholas, but after that, Karina's whereabouts became uncertain. The following day, February 22nd, Manuel and Jose informed the police that Karina had grown frustrated during the ride because they hadn't taken her home. They claimed that she got out of the car and hailed a taxi on Brazil Avenue, describing the cab as a yellow Nissan. When David gave his statement to the police, he claimed he was too drunk to remember many details, but confirmed that Karina had indeed taken a taxi. Investigators then checked the GPS data from Manuel's car and reviewed security footage from the area. This footage verified that Cecilia and Nicholas were dropped off at their respective homes, but it also revealed a crucial detail. Karina and Jose shared a kiss in the back seat, a fact that Jose had failed to mention, raising suspicion toward him and David. As the investigation deepened, the GPS data showed that the vehicle had not stopped on Brazil Avenue, where they had claimed Karina took a taxi. In addition, satellite tracking revealed that the car had been parked for several hours at a location known as Llano Chico, situated about 5 miles from Juan Pablo's house. This discovery captured the police's attention, prompting them to rush to the area, convinced they were on the verge of finding important evidence. On the evening of February 27th, around 6 p.m., the anti-kidnapping unit entered the ravine situated between Llano Chico and Llano Grande. They followed a cobblestone path that led them to a dead-end dirt road. It was there that they stumbled upon a crucial piece of evidence: Karina's owl necklace, which she had been wearing on the day she vanished 8 days earlier. However, that was just the beginning. As they continued their search, the agents noticed that bushes had been cut and there were disturbed patches of soil in the area. Venturing deeper into the undergrowth, they came across a tree trunk that released a terrible odor. When they lifted the trunk, they were met with a horrifying sight. Karina's lifeless body was lying beneath it, in an advanced state of decomposition. Her remains were collected for further examination to provide clarity in a case filled with unanswered questions. Following this grim discovery, charges were filed against Manuel, David, Jose, Juan Pablo, and Nicholas for Karina's murder. However, Cecilia and Nicholas were eventually cleared of any involvement when it was confirmed they were at their respective homes during the time of the crime. The autopsy results revealed that Karina had died in the early hours of February 20th, just hours after the gathering at Juan Pablo's apartment. She had suffered multiple skull fractures consistent with being struck by a hard object, possibly a rock. Additionally, she had sustained a brain hemorrhage and showed signs of strangulation. Disturbingly, there were indications of sexual assault, and her fingernails were filled with soil that matched the crime scene. Male bodily fluid was also found on her body, but forensic analysis could not definitively link it to David, Manuel, or Jose. The suspects were unaware that fluid samples had been collected at the time of the investigation. On March 12th, a more thorough examination of Manuel's vehicle confirmed the presence of blood and saliva matching Karina's DNA inside. By then, the case had captured the attention of the entire nation. A march was organized the same day, where Karina's family joined forces with families of other missing women to demand justice. As the investigation progressed, Jose, Manuel, and David began contradicting their earlier statements. David, who had previously claimed to remember nothing due to being passed out drunk, later stated that he had gone along with Manuel while Jose drove the taxi because he felt pressured by the police. Upon learning about the fluid samples, he admitted to having consensual sexual relations with Karina, complicating the case further. The story of Karina Dello quickly evolved from a tragic disappearance into a complex investigation that shook the community and raised serious questions about justice and accountability. The tireless efforts of her family and friends, combined with the evolving details of the case, highlighted the urgent need for answers and justice in the face of such an unimaginable loss. Manuel's story regarding Karina's disappearance shifted dramatically. Initially, he stated that Karina had taken a taxi on Brazil Avenue. However, he later claimed that David instructed him to drive to Llano, where Karina was murdered. Manuel alleged that David made advances on Karina, and when she refused, he got out of the car and threatened her, saying, "Do you want to see how someone is killed?" According to Manuel, David then attacked Karina with a rock before strangling her. Manuel insisted that he watched the entire incident from the car and was not involved. Jose's account also changed over time. At first, he couldn't recall the events that transpired in the car, but later, after learning about the fluid sample found at the crime scene, he admitted to engaging in consensual sexual activity with Karina at Juan Pablo's apartment. A few days later, Manuel revised his story again, claiming that after Karina exited the car, David attacked her, strangled her, and asked for Manuel's help to hold her down. Manuel alleged that he assisted David before striking Karina with a rock. However, this version contradicted forensic evidence, which showed no signs that Karina had died from neck fractures. Jose later changed his statement once more, claiming that David attempted to touch Karina during the drive. When she screamed, Manuel allegedly got out to help David kill her. They supposedly beat her with a rock, and when she didn't die, David reportedly slit her throat. Like Manuel's second statement, This account did not align with the autopsy findings. These conflicting narratives left investigators with more questions than answers. Although both Jose and Manuel pointed to David as the killer, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. In March, it was revealed that blood had been discovered inside Manuel's car, particularly on the steering wheel, door handles, and floor mats, indicating that the person who killed Karina had been seated in the front. Further investigation at Manuel's home uncovered dirt and mud matching that found on Karina's body. His clothes from the night of the crime also had bloodstains, and Karina's memory card was found in his wallet. Jose's bed sheets contained Karina's blood, and his shoes had soil from the murder site. In contrast, David had no traces of blood or soil at his home or on his clothes, leading investigators to suspect he might have cleaned up in the days following the crime. Despite the lack of physical evidence against David, the testimonies of Manuel and Jose still implicated him. As the case unfolded, public opinion varied, with some blaming Karina for putting herself at risk by spending time with these young men. A controversial YouTube video, later removed, even suggested that Karina had brought the situation upon herself by showing her address to a male friend. Liz, one of Karina's closest friends, spoke out, emphasizing that Karina had no reason to distrust the boys. Shockingly, when authorities questioned Liz, they even suggested Karina might have been involved in sex work, an offensive and baseless line of inquiry. In response, Liz firmly denied that Karina had ever engaged in such activities and asserted that even if she had, it did not justify the crime. Furthermore, the police questioned her about Karina's clothing choices and behavior. Later, Liz stated in an interview that if Karina had been a man, those questions would never have been asked. That same year, the trial commenced for Manuel, Jose, and David. Psychological profiles were prepared, revealing that Manuel suffered from an inferiority complex, was submissive, and had a history of misogynistic tendencies and violence. In contrast, Jose exhibited psychopathic traits, lacking moral principles and harboring deep-seated hatred toward women. Both were known to have a history of drug use. David's profile differed. He did not show misogynistic attitudes, but was characterized as having a narcissistic and paranoid personality. His lawyer argued that he was not involved in the crime, attempting to distance him from the actions of the others. David returned home before the crime occurred, supported by a phone call from his then-girlfriend that placed him at his residence during Karina's death. His lawyer highlighted that strands of female hair were discovered in Karina's hand, suggesting that a woman may have been involved in the crime but went unnoticed during the investigation. Despite evidence indicating that Jose was the primary perpetrator, with Manuel acting as an accomplice and David as a scapegoat, the prosecution did not revise its accusations. Manuel's statement, which identified David as both the murderer and the abuser, became the official narrative. In this version, Manuel claimed he helped pin Karina down and handed David rocks to strike her with. It was concluded that Jose was innocent except for being present at the crime scene. In October 2013, the court declared David the main perpetrator of the crime, while Manuel and Jose were convicted as accomplices. All three received a 25-year prison sentence for Karina's murder, alongside a $220,000 compensation payment to her family. David was the only one to shed tears as the verdict was read, and many in the public believed in his innocence, as lingering questions about the case remained unanswered. A lawyer involved in the case later revealed in an interview that, before the first hearing, Manuel and Jose had mocked David, reportedly claiming they were the real culprits and suggesting it was a clever tactic to shift the blame onto David. The lawyer noted that despite the psychological evaluations of Manuel and Jose, the presence of Karina's DNA on their clothing, in the car, and the discovery of her memory card in Manuel's wallet led to their classification as mere accomplices in the crime. David continued to assert that media and political pressure surrounding the case resulted in an unjust ruling against him. He questioned why Manuel's inconsistent testimony had been accepted as the truth despite its frequent changes. David felt as though he was being held hostage by the state, as the prosecution never fully investigated the possibility that he was not present at the crime scene. Meanwhile, Karina's family struggled to cope with their devastating loss. At the time of her murder, femicide had not yet been classified in Ecuadorian criminal law. In April 2013, Karina's cousin proposed a bill to the National Assembly to officially define femicide as a crime. The following year, Ecuador's Congress passed reforms to the Penal Code, recognizing femicide as the killing of a woman due to power dynamics and any form of violence related to her gender, with penalties ranging from 22 to 26 years in prison. Although the case contributed to a significant legal milestone, tragedies continued. In 2015, David was assaulted by 4 inmates, who were later sentenced to 29 years in prison for the attack. Over the following years, David studied law while incarcerated and graduated in April 2022. A judge partially granted a habeas corpus request in David's favor, a legal procedure to protect an individual's liberty when threatened by an authority or when imprisoned under worsening conditions. However, this ruling did not reduce his sentence or allow him to serve it under different conditions. It did stipulate that David should receive psychological treatment for the abuse he suffered in prison and be transferred to health centers as necessary. David's lawyer filed an appeal, and on May 23, 2023, he was granted parole. The hearing allowed him to leave the prison where he had spent the last 10 years and 3 months. As part of his release conditions, David was required to check in weekly at the prison for 5 hours, wear an electronic ankle monitor, stay away from Karina's family, report to the judge monthly, and undergo regular psychological evaluations. Jose, for his part, was transferred to a different facility due to misconduct. To this day, the exact events of the night Karina was murdered remain unclear. While some believe David is guilty, others see him as a victim of injustice. Speculation continues that Jose may have been the one to assault and murder Karina, with Manuel aiding him. What is certain is that Karina's death was a femicide involving extreme violence perpetrated by 3 men. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more shocking and compelling stories ahead.